Welcome back, everybody. Tonight, we've got a very special episode for you because for the first time here on Neutrality Studies, we've got an acting president with us. My colleague, Felix Marquardt, interviewed President José Ramos-Horta, the head of state of the Southeast Asian nation Timor-Leste. Here you go.
I'm Felix Marquardt, and this is the Black Elephant Experience. Today, it's our immense honor and privilege to welcome the president of Timor-Leste, José Ramos-Horta. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
A couple of years ago, which was the last time we met in Lisbon, it was a few months after October 7, and I spoke of the drift, what I saw from Europe as the drift towards European irrelevance. I'm very curious to hear from you 2 years later. What is your take on the situation and especially seen from Southeast Asia?
Well, in Southeast Asia, we are obviously relatively at peace. There are the conflicts in Myanmar, but it is an internal conflict, civil war, we would say, but it is not a conflict that involves other countries. It is not a conflict that is spilled over to other countries. It is contained there, of course, with a lot of implications. Myanmar today is one of the biggest, maybe the first biggest exporter of drugs, maybe, or the second. Rampant organized crime, but it is contained within the confines of their borders. We have tensions in the South China Sea. The tensions increasing with activities by some countries, but still, we cannot say that this is a regional or global threat. And of course, you have then the situation in Afghanistan that is endless war. And then in West Asia, Middle East, Yemen, North Africa, with ramifications all over. The endless war in Ukraine, already 4 years. What I would say is that if we start the conversation by saying the Security Council, particularly P5, they are the prime guarantors of peace and security in the world. They are the ones who are entrusted by the rest of the international community, being permanent members, hugely prestigious, with huge responsibility, to prevent conflicts. And if and when conflicts happen, we cannot always prevent, but when we do not succeed, then the next step is trying to mediate to end this conflict. But then when you have of the P5, at least 3 are directly involved in Ukraine, for instance, and I'm not making any value judgment about it. I'm just saying they are involved. Russia is the aggressor invading Ukraine. Russia can come up with all kinds of arguments, and that we all know. It goes back to the end of the Cold War, when the Warsaw Pact was dissolved. NATO not only did not dissolve, but expanded very fast toward the borders of Russia. And then the pro-Russia leader in Ukraine ousted with direct interference by some of the Western countries in fomenting the unrest, And then when you have a regime in Ukraine that's obviously pro-NATO, anti-Russia, in the perception of Russia, then Moscow is worried about the Navy base in Crimea. So the first action Russia took was to invade Crimea to prevent it from being annexed by NATO together with Ukraine joining NATO. And then maybe because of the Palestinians realize that their fate is under threat of being sealed by the US, Israel, and some of Israel allies, that another nail will be put in the coffin of the Palestinians. Hamas did October 7 attack. The rest we know. One of the most tragic, catastrophic war in memory. The devastation of Gaza, the killing of tens of thousands of innocent people, children, women, carpet bombing of Gaza, hospitals, universities, private homes, factories, hotels, and so on, all destroyed, you can see. And then not able to resolve the Gaza conflict, the US and Israel not able to resolve it. Israel didn't win the war against the Palestinians in Gaza or West Bank. Launched a war against Iran to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons when Iran has stated it has no ambition to acquire nuclear weapons, and there is no evidence whatsoever that they have nuclear weapons. So that's where we are. What a catastrophic situation. And the UN is almost completely sidelined.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below, and now back to the video.
Indeed it is. And I think most people would argue that not only is international law sidelined completely, but the credibility of those who've been the guarantors or who've presented themselves to the world as the most adamant defenders of international law, i.e. Western countries and particularly Europe, had absolutely nothing to say about the genocide in Gaza. They had nothing to say about the last intervention in 2025 on Iran. They had nothing to say about the kidnapping of Maduro. And suddenly they woke up and sort of started speaking of international law again when Donald Trump started speaking of Greenland. So, I mean, is it really something that the Europeans can continue talking about international law?
I have to say that European Union, France, the conflicts in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, the attack on Iran expose the double standards that undermine everyone's credibility when we use double standards toward similar use of force with genocide ramifications. The West applaud when the ICC indicted Putin. And then major reaction, incredible reaction against ICC for indicting Prime Minister Netanyahu. Well, the conclusion is we should conclude that after all, international law, ICC, ICJ, is only for the weaker countries. There was never any difficulty for ICC to indict African leaders.
Exactly.
There were no difficulties indicting Milosevic and others from the defeated ex-Yugoslavia. But suddenly it becomes a major crisis when an ally of the West is indicted. So it discredits the entire, undermine the entire security architecture, undermine the credibility of the Security Council as a multilateral collective security system, undermine credibility of Europe, because obviously how can European leaders lecture on human rights, on democracy elsewhere? And then we have one UN President of General Assembly who, when she was foreign minister of one European country, Germany, she went out of her way to justify a bombing of schools in Gaza. She said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then she became President of General Assembly.
Yeah.
Hell. So that's where we are with. But in addition, because all these crises, conflict, cause so much economic dislocation, the European economies are anemic. U.S. economy is in shambles because of the massive deficit, and of course, ODA for the President Trump administration is, how you say, it's anathema to his philosophical beliefs. So U.S. aid was terminated. U.S. engagements with many countries terminated. The wars caused enormous dislocation around the world in terms of trade and so on. Europe itself is in economic financial stress. So ODA has been reduced everywhere throughout the world by the bilateral donors, by the European Union, everywhere. They have significantly cut. It doesn't mean that ODA was extremely well managed and resulted in benefit of the people. So we arrive at a situation where hundreds of millions of people affected by the war fought elsewhere in Europe, in Iran, people who lost their jobs, middle class lost their jobs, oil price is skyrocketing, and that impact on shipping, the Strait of Hormuz blockage conflict impact, we all know all that. So very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Any possibility of solution? I don't see how. The solution for the war with Ukraine, with Ukraine and Russia, belong to the two countries, belong to the leaders of the two, to realize that this war can go on and on, no victory by one side or the other, mutual destruction, as has been happening the last 4 years, And like in any situation of conflict, you have to make concessions, both sides.
The United States have just outsourced the management of that war entirely to Europe. And they're trying to get completely out of it, but basically encouraging the Europeans to continue in this conflict. Meanwhile, a Japanese oil tanker crossed the Strait of Hormuz after paying transit fees in Chinese yuan. Until very recently, the mere idea of this was completely unthinkable. You are the head of a state that is an oil and gas producing country. How do you see this evolution, this new conversation that is happening between Iran and the BRICS in general, but China in particular?
The countries that ignited this war with Iran, that is the United States and Israel, and the almost classic of Israel uh, uh, underestimated the other side, overestimated itself, and dragged the U.S. along into the war in Iraq. As much as I obviously find it a catastrophic mistake on the part of the United States to get involved with Israel in attacking Iran, this does not spare Iran of its own responsibility in the situation in the region. Let's not be naive. Iran wants it to be the power of the region over Saudi Arabia, over Egypt, over the Gulf countries. That's their ambition. And U.S. and Israel, in invading Iran, create a condition whereby the United States has to leave, will leave, as it left Afghanistan. After 20 years, tens of thousands of lives lost under President, first under Trump, first term, negotiated with Taliban for the withdrawal of Americans from Iraq, from Afghanistan. Came Biden, negotiations continue and expedite the withdrawal. After 20 years of war in Afghanistan, tens of thousands of lives lost, they had to leave. They could not claim any victory whatsoever. They just left.
Mhm.
This is going to happen also with Iran. US will leave. Who come out losing will be Israel. Total loss for Israel. Colossal mistake by Israel. Who is the big winner? Iran. And consequences of all of this paid by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait,
The GCC countries.
UAE, the GCC countries. And the GCC countries had won. They had won the American side. The Israelis do not start a war with Iran. It will have implications for the whole region. The US side succumbed to the pressure, the lobby from Israel, launched into this. So now what is the solution? It's for the US to leave, but the consequences of the US departure in these conditions, catastrophic. We're all going to pay a price. The energy market is not going to settle very soon. Even if the war ends today, I don't think they're going to settle the Hormuz issue. And by playing with the Hormuz Strait, free passage, what's going to happen? Who is going to tell a power in Asia that one day want to obstruct free passage, free movement in the South China Sea. Or how about the Malacca Strait, that is as important as the Hormuz Strait? So we create precedent. Precedents are created that will happen elsewhere. Meaning we destroy international law, we destroy law of the sea, freedom of navigation, settlement of dispute, and we create anarchy. And in anarchy, everybody is a loser, including the big powers.
Iran claims that it is leading a defensive war, an existential war. It seems that it is convincing more and more people in the region that its positions are legitimate. I'm talking about Oman, which has great relations with the US, but which has a very decent relationship with Iran. I'm talking about Pakistan, which very recently, when Foreign Minister Arakshi flew from Pakistan, from Islamabad, where, by the way, the U.S. negotiators were supposed to show up, whether it be J.D. Vance or Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, whom in the end did not show up. When Arakshi leaves Islamabad for Moscow, where he had a very symbolically charged meeting with Putin, the Pakistanis made the decision they're implementing a directive facilitating a dramatic expansion of transit across Pakistan of third country goods to Iran. There's also China that is using rail to ship oil over to China instead of using the sea. So it seems to me that a lot of people are taking the position that Iran's claims to some extent are legitimate. And it strikes me that Iran's position is not merely a transactional position. Iran has been defending a resistance movement across the region, working with the Houthis, working with Hezbollah, working with Syria before it was handed over to the former leader of ISIS. The expansionist Great Israel Project was unacceptable to anyone in the region, not only Iran. And I feel like sometimes we're trying to reduce Iran's position to a strategic position when actually this is a position that is also about anti-colonialism and
Legitimate, I do not dismiss it, obviously. For many decades, almost every U.S. administration maintained sanctions on Iran. Obama negotiated a nuclear deal successfully. Situation had a chance of being normalized, and Iran returning to normalcy in the relationship with the West, for instance. And these countries, they forget that, in all the terrorist attacks in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere in the past, over the years, there was no Iranian nationals involved. Not one that we know of. Iran was not involved in attacks in Europe and the United States. And so turning Iran into like an exporter of terrorism, a supporter of terrorism, is not wise. That Iran interfere in the politics of other countries, as they do. But some of the countries, major powers have done that for many decades. And when Iran has stated time and again, it is not looking to produce nuclear weapons. What else could they have done? Say, the only time when they enrich uranium beyond certain levels was when the negotiations ended, when the Trump administration abandoned the nuclear deal negotiated by Obama, and all of that. They had the International Atomic Energy Agency inspecting, very draconian inspections. Sometimes, yeah, the Iranians rejected, but but having said all of that, uh, I certainly do not agree that Iran would attack Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and so on. These countries are very vulnerable. They stated categorically again and again in recent past against the war. U.S. didn't listen to them. By expanding the war into the GCC countries, uh, it is Iran also doing what the United States and Israel doing. Why invading? Why bombing, targeting civilian infrastructure? They are not targeting only American infrastructures in the Gulf countries. They have been targeting civilian infrastructure.
They would push back on that. Overwhelmingly, what they have targeted are U.S. bases in the region.
Well, if they have a target that only U.S. based in the region, probably these U.S. bases will no longer exist. UAE alone have taken at least 2,000 missiles. The UAE, they were able to intercept more than 90%. Very effective interception. But all the others, well, look at the attacks in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar itself, which in the past had good relationship with Iran. One of the few countries that maintain certain relationship with Iran.
They also had the biggest U.S. base in the region.
That's true also, like U.S. has the biggest base in Germany and elsewhere in Europe, in Japan, in the Philippines, and so on. So we are so Iran would have each case stronger if it would leave the GCC countries completely out of it. Leave it to public opinion in the Arab world, leave it to the Americans to put pressure on all sides to resolve. But what they're doing is expanding the war.
America has used all these countries as a means to interfere with the whole region. Had those bases not been there, they would not have retaliated against that American presence, and therefore not retaliated against those countries. Following the attacks that took place, the so-called 12-day war that took place last year, they had warned the U.S., if you attack us again, we will retaliate against all your bases in the region. Not taking that into account when you look at what Iran did after they started being bombed by Israel and America, seems a bit disingenuous.
The reality is, the fact is, it is the U.S. and Israel that attack Iran. The war is between Iran, the U.S., and Israel. And maybe with other Western countries involved. Then it is Iran that launched ballistic missiles into their neighbors, Arab countries. So that is the reality. So who is expanding this war? The Saudis, the UAE, they had warned the US, Israel, do not attack Iran. War will spill over to the rest of the region. It will engulf the region. They told that. The Americans, the Israelis didn't listen. They launched the war against Iran. Then Iran expand the war, make it spill over into the Arab countries. The same countries that had warned the US, had appealed to the US not to invade, not to attack Iran. My point is this, Iran, by attacking these countries, it is ironically the net result. The implication is that they are the ones expanding the war into other countries.
Yeah, I think they would argue that deterrence for them required attacking the US bases in the region as a whole. That was the only way to show deterrence, to seek deterrence. And
But the reality is that the planes bombing Iran, they do not fly out of UAE or anywhere. They fly out from the US aircraft carriers. Obviously, they fly out from Israel. Israel doesn't fly out from Kuwait or from Qatar, from anywhere.
No, but the bases around the region are used to carry out these attacks. They are used, whether they are directly used with bombs like missiles being launched or planes taking off from. They are definitely used for intelligence purposes. They are actually part of this war. They are playing a role.
So when will be Europe attacked by Iran as well?
I will
So
leave
there
that
are
for
U.S. bases in
You've led the War of Independence of Timor. You were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and I'm very interested in your take on it being awarded to Mrs. Machado. I would like to hear your take on the question of guerrilla fighter, like freedom fighter versus terrorist. Earlier in our conversation, you spoke of the attacks on October 7, and you referred to the war on Gaza. The vast majority of genocide scholars in the world calling it a genocide, and most NGOs calling it a genocide. I'm curious to what is your position? When does a freedom fighter become a terrorist? Earlier in the conversation, you said conflict and war, and then you called it a genocide. Where do you sit today?
My position remains very, very much the same for the last 50 years. I do not excuse violence by one side or another. I accept the laws of war, the realities of war, in that in armed conflicts, the two sides engage in killing, in destruction. I accept that. But there are laws governing all of this because human civilization evolved over the years and we codify our behavior in situations of war. And that you don't attack hospitals, you don't kill civilians, you don't kill innocent people, children, and all of that. And I'm not going to change my philosophy, my beliefs. After 50 years, I always believe in that. Those of us who fought or fight for freedom, for human dignity, we cannot descend to the level of those we are fighting against, who murder, rape, and destroy hospitals and so on. For me, there is no cause, political cause, no ideology, no religion that can justify carpet bombing, justify indiscriminate killing of civilians, rape of women and their children. Anyone who does that, whether a state, in this case Israel, or United States, or Iran, or a national liberation movement, supposed to be a national liberation movement, but engages in the killing of innocent people. Sorry, I apply the same judgment. They are wrong. All are wrong. I will not accept any argument from any national liberation movement that, oh, we are fighting oppression. Yeah, you fight oppression by killing innocent people, women, children.
So,
That for me,
no,
in my country, in Timor-Leste, our National Liberation Army, Falintil, never touched a single Indonesian civilian. No Indonesian military people captured in battles were ever summarily executed. Not one.
you mentioned rape. There is now significant data showing that rape was not used as a weapon of war on October 7, that every single allegation in that respect was completely fabricated. And so I think it's important to mention that in this conversation. Half the population of Gaza, as you know, is made up of children. And this accusation of rape has a long history of being used to carry out exactions, mass murder, and destruction of schools and hospitals and civilian infrastructure. And that's exactly what happened after October 7th.
I was not referring to any specific situation. I'm just saying the moral standard is this, and I abide by the moral standard in my judgment. When you carpet bomb a whole city, a whole town, and then make the argument that, oh, because the terrorists, Hamas is hiding in the hospital, hiding it, that is totally unacceptable. But the same time, the other side also, that I'm referring to Iran, God, what the Iranian regime has done all these decades, how many prisoners they have, tens of thousands of Iranians languishing in prison. And I disagree with the punishment of Iran, the sanctions over the decades. I disagree with the sweeping judgment of Iran, nuclear ambitions, and all of that. But I'm not going to close my eyes to what I know the Iranian regime does to people in Iran.
No, I think some of us feel that the reckoning underway. The West had it coming, and as you pointed out, sort of the dismantling of international law and the international order has been essentially the product of the West's behavior. The killing of civilians and the destruction of civilian infrastructure was almost universal to every single American intervention in the world for the last 100 years. I don't disagree with you on the norm that you're describing, which is of not attacking civilians. But I find it not surprising that most people around the world are very dubious about the US talking about this ever. When you look at the number of children that were killed, not by George W. Bush, but by the embargo and the oil for food program that affected Iraqi children during the 90s under Bill Clinton. When you look at the fact that Iran had a democratically elected government in 1953, which made the incredibly daring decision to say that the money of Iranian oil should go to the Iranian people. And immediately there was a coup organized by MI6 and the CIA that got rid of that government. Western credibility and legitimacy on these issues is now completely in shambles. And there is a tendency to look at this as something that happened recently, when actually the track record shows that this has been going on for not even decades. It's a century-long history of killing civilians whenever America wants to kill civilians or European countries want to kill civilians. It's just nonstop.
Of course, this history, this happened in Vietnam. The Vietnamese suffer still the effect of orange bombs, the chemical orange that, with the legacy of it, we see in Vietnam. Obviously, Iran, in my view, suffered unfair and justified isolation, pressure, sanctions of all sorts, all these last 40 years or so. But there were also madness in Iran. When we lead the people, we have to measure everything. If we lead with morality, if I criticize American support for the Shah, the brutalities of the Shah, I try not to replicate, to do exactly what the others have done. So they also created enemies unnecessarily. They also contributed with their speeches, if not in practice, at least in the speeches, their demonization by other people. My point is, I'm no longer a naive to find excuses, justification for certain countries, certain regimes, and demonizing all others. I'm sorry, but I no longer belong to that age of too much romanticism about the left, about the socialist revolution, and only the right has done wrong and the left has done all well. And I don't buy either. I don't buy either the Western propaganda of Western about the rest of the world, about China or about even Russia. And Putin obviously is not a Jeffersonian Democrat, far from it. But God, try to live with Putin, try to live with Russia, and try to live with China. Let China be China. China is not an enemy. China is a rival, a strategic rival, if they want to call it that way. A rival in trade, in science, in technology. But that's all we are like that. But to label China an enemy, a threat, demonize Putin, but then don't demonize Netanyahu.
Speaking of Netanyahu, the latest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Mrs. Machado in Venezuela, actually called on Netanyahu famously to intervene to free the country from Maduro. What on earth has happened to the Nobel Peace Prize?
There were instances in history that they might have given the prize to their own person. And I know from fact, from history of the Nobel Committee, they regretted giving the prize to Henry Kissinger. And the Henry Kissinger counterpart in the Paris negotiations, the Vietnamese envoy, Le Duc Tho, also was supposed to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, but he rejected, he refused. Maybe precisely because to receive it alongside Kissinger. And they never gave it to Mahatma Gandhi. Although I know from history that actually the year Mahatma Gandhi was going to receive the Nobel Peace Prize when he was killed. And the Peace Prize is not given posthumously after death.
Mm-hmm.
Serious mistake that they never gave to Mahatma Gandhi. Serious mistake that they gave to Kissinger. They gave it to this lady from Venezuela. I never met her. I don't know her. Never even close. So, and I was surprised that she would give the Peace Prize to President Trump when the Nobel Committee, and they forced the Nobel Committee to come out publicly to state it is not transmissible. And then other statements she made, asking Netanyahu to liberate Venezuela or something to that effect. But that's her judgment. I share the Peace Prize with the people of Timor-Leste. When I won the Peace Prize, I said, this belongs to the people. And I actually didn't keep the Peace Prize. It is in the headquarters of our defense force. And why I gave it to them? Because during the struggle, they never touched a single civilian. And when I hand over the Peace Prize to them, just as guardian, it is not transmissible. I say, give here to remind you always that the army must serve the people. It's an army for peace, never to intimidate, never to kill people.
One last question, Mr. President, before I let you go. I don't think there are many countries in the world that have very good relations with all their regional neighbors, but also with all the superpowers, the way that you do. In the liberation struggle of Timor-Leste, you lost several family members. I think it was 3 of your brothers died in those times, and yet you have excellent relations with Indonesia. You have excellent relations with Australia, with China, with the US. What is your approach to diplomacy, the legacy that you want to pass on to your successors?
No demonizing anyone. Of course, there are circumstances where you should not even talk to particular people. When those people are engaged in a full-fledged war of destruction, of genocide, there is no dialogue possible. But my philosophy, my belief is in situations like Iran, before this war started, in Ukraine, there were ample opportunity to prevent the conflict from happening, the wars from happening. There were ample opportunities. But always, different sides, either they overestimate themselves, underestimate the other side. Wars happen like this. You have tensions, you have difficulties with the other side, and you start looking at alternatives instead of looking for dialogue. You start looking at your strength, your force. That's what Russia did in regard to Ukraine. And that's what Netanyahu did in regard to Gaza, underestimated the Palestinians. He didn't want the war in Gaza. Israel lost as never before. The big problem for Israel is self-destruction. How Israel is going to recover morally from all of this. This is a destruction of the values of the Jewish, of Judaism. How we are going to recover from that? Israeli society is going to go through serious problems. More damage to Israel than any other war in the past that Israel fought. At the same time, I totally understand the complexities of diplomacy, complexities of international relations, not that simple. You have Russia and Ukraine, now what? The war happened, is ongoing. How to reach a solution? I said 4 years ago in a talk like this, but with a think tank in Portugal. I said way back 4 years ago, the size to this war is Ukraine and Russia all have to make concessions. In this case, territorial concessions. How can Putin back off? Very difficult. How can Zelensky back off? Very difficult. But this war, I will call it lose-lose. No win-win. It's lose-lose.
Is it possible to get, this will be my last question, is it possible to get a win-win when you give the keys to the negotiations to real estate promoters?
Well, yeah, I don't understand how some of the people involved in the negotiations, in Iran negotiations, with Ukraine negotiations, when the UN appointed the negotiators, mediators for Iraq war, Afghanistan, Syria, I know at least one of them, Algerian diplomat, Lakhdar Brahimi, one of the most experienced negotiators ever. He did Afghanistan, he did Iraq, and the last was Syria. He went to Syria and stayed there for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, he spoke to the Syrian people, he apologized. He said, I apologize that I have failed you. I cannot resolve this. He was the best diplomat the UN could have. The UN found the best diplomat. Before Lakhdar Brahimi was Kofi Annan, but Kofi Annan did only 3 months. So you cannot send inexperienced people, whether real estate developers or a banker or...
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I will have you back very soon, I hope. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.